Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11, and of course we are playing as Japan. I really like this map. It's not perfect, it's nice. Normally what I played on before, this is obviously to get very good clarity for what the terrain type is, so I jump over this. This is something I learned to do for the YouTube audience. Few people have colorblind issues or maybe other sight issues. They, guys have. Obviously, you can just listen to me, but and I'm sure half the people who watch also just sort of have me on while playing and whatever else. They're just sort of listening and glancing up once in a while. But been told also, just even without vision issues of any sort. Just where the front lines are and whatnot is more clear of what's going on. So yeah, gonna do this. We're gonna start out, and I started to do this, but I realized, hey, you guys might be interested. We're going to start figuring out what we're doing for units. I'm gonna cycle through. I got a few sort of strays. Okay, sending the coastal battleships down here to, as you can see, Saipan to sort of do shore bombardment / escort for these guys instead of actually attaching them here. I'm just going to get the fleet sitting here, and I presume that they'll be able to make that run effectively. And we're going to send the Yamato group down here with 2 light aircraft carriers, basically in preparation for the Philippines. Light carriers. I think we're going to come down here. No, I don't think we're going to be facing, what is it, the Hood and the Repulse down here, but who knows. And my initial moves here are, well, obviously this is going to be a land movement, but fairly quickly, and we don't have any well, what are they doing on here? Oh, get off. I mean to go put those on something else. Maybe I did. Oh, probably I did. We got better invasion forces, but we probably don't need all of that. Yeah, oh, and I was told a trick. If I click on this province and then hover over here, supposed to tell me the distance, or do I need to click on? Ah, yes, okay. Click on the land province. Okay, 2600 from Anantawak. 2100, so, or whatever. And we can see here, yeah, those, I think those are the longest range, the assault ships. Oh, that might make it 27,000 kilometers, so. Okay, they can make it. Okay, so if I get escort vessels that can make it, we can go straight in for Hawaii if we can. So, let's set up our theoretical and bigger carrier attack on Hawaii in part. Okay, bit of history here. Like I've said before, and I know those of you, we got those of you who watch every episode. We got those who check out every episode, meaning you, because I less than 10% fully watch all the way through. I get those stats. In fact, it's right around 10-ish% watch the majority of the content. But I do know a fair number of you skip through the episode just to sort of see what's going on, and a lot of this stuff is sort of boring, and there's a lot of content out there, so I totally get that. But So I will repeat myself. Um, in starting this series and the previous Japanese series on Hearts of Iron 4, did a bunch of reading, including Japanese Destroyer Captain by Captain Hira. Good book, recommend it if you want to sort of get a Japanese perspective on the Pacific War and the Japanese naval culture and similar things. Basically, all of these fleets, now I've got more carriers than they had at the time. We're all here in Yokosuka. This is Yokosuka. I know it says Chigasaki, but for the war, and for this was sort of Japan's main naval base complex, whatever you want to call it. Not necessarily production. I have no idea if they even produced any ships here, as opposed to Tokyo or other Yokohama or other major Hiroshima here or other major dockyards. I don't quite honestly know where their production was, but this is sort of the main sort of naval thing, sort of in the greater, as you can see, Tokyo area and part of the Tokyo Bay. Basically, all of the basically described as all of the Japanese fleet gets together, and I'm sure it's not every last vessel, but all of the sort of high seas fleet gets together just before Pearl Harbor is kicked off, and they have, I think it is on the Yamato, a huge number of captains get together. And basically, as you might sort of envision the treatment of junior officers, you know, I mean, not in any way harsh or any way demeaning, but just sort of, you know, visiting sort of a flagship or something like that in a group, sort of chivied around and, you know, told where to go and what to do and where to stand and all this stuff. Well, this is how captains of carriers and battleships, let alone destroyers and other captains, were treated, because there were just so many of them that came aboard to sort of hear this speech. You know, and executive officers and other officers of the different ships basically weren't even allowed, just because of crowd space, if you will, for the captains. And I think it was on the fantail or the rear area of the ship out of doors, and they had supposedly, I'm sure it's not 100% universal, but basically had gotten rid of all of the regular seamen away from this part of the ship. I'm sure they were still on the ship, but so basically they weren't listening to this, and so they sort of describe what is, you know, that they're getting ready to go to war with America. And Yamamoto is giving the speeches, and he very much describes to them that you will obey any orders to call off the attack. Because, one, I know he knew that this would be the destruction of Japan going into this attack. And of course, you don't want to destroy your country, but he knew it was going to destroy the country. But he also knew that if he resigned in protest, they'd get somebody else to do it and it would still go ahead. So he thought he would try to do the war as best he could for his nation. But he knew it was going to destroy Japan. And additionally to that, partially because he had lived in America for a while, he did not see the British and the Americans as a enemy of Japan. Meaning, he thought they could coexist well and peacefully, and he wasn't anti-American or anti-British. He was not part of the Tojo clique, or even the Navy had long, since World War I basically, and even to some degree before, even though they were allied with the U.S. during World War I, realized at some point that the main possible naval threat to Japan was the United States, because Soviet Russia had functionally no real navy to threaten Japan. You know, this is looking at it from a naval warfare perspective, not from the army in Manchuria or other sorts of things, but from a naval perspective. And this, like, say, to some degree goes back before World War One, definitely in the post-World War One era. You know, you don't worry about, well, how would we fight a war with, oh, I don't know, Peru or Bolivia, naval war with Bolivia. If you don't know Americans, there is no coastline. So Bolivia has, if it has a navy, it's a force on a river somewhere. It has no ships. So you don't worry about hypothetical wars so much. And you very well might play war games to, what would the Union and the Confederacy do, and how to, just as sort of intellectual exercises, if you're the Japanese or something like that, or what would the French and the British do, whether during the Napoleonic Wars or, modern day. You might very well war game out just to sort of see how battles like that would go. But you look at possible, maybe not likely threats, but possible threats. So Germany, the rise of Adolf Hitler, does not threaten the Japanese Navy. A few battleships sitting in the Atlantic, sure, they can get to the Pacific, but by the time they get there, they're just going to be a couple, 2, 3, 4 battleships or something, whether you count pocket battleships or the Tirpitz or the Bismarck or whatever. That's going to be no real threat. Even if there's a political conflict with Germany, just saying, not that that was likely at the time, but even if there's a political conflict, and even if they go to war with Germany for some reason, there could have been a coup inside of Germany. We saw one contemplated in 1938 over the Czechoslovakian crisis against Hitler, an army coup. So maybe you put the Kaiser back in, and the Kaiser wants his Pacific Islands back, or Kaiser's back in and he's part of something, and some Germans have a brain aneurysm and they decide to go to war with Japan over some trade issue or something. And so Japan may outfit an expeditionary force, maybe get some basing or something from some allies in the West or something, but sends out an expeditionary force to go try to sink some German ships. That may happen in a theoretical possibility, but that is not what a Navy war games and worries about with. So, like during the Cold War, the U.S. Navy was very much focused on a confrontation with with the Soviets in the North Atlantic. That's sort of where they envision it. Of course, there was the Pacific Fleet, but the Soviets' Pacific Fleet was very minor, and the U.S. Pacific Fleet was very heavy because it was also during the Cold War supporting the South Vietnamese, supporting the operations earlier in Korea, supporting possibly Taiwan against Red Chinese. So the U.S. had a major naval presence in the Pacific. And of course, since the U.S. Navy is everywhere, like the old Royal Navy used to be, the U.S. Navy war games out how to fight every nation, including nations like Britain that are obviously not in a political possibility that us going to war in the foreseeable future, but they still war game them out. And of course, they look at minor nations anyways that are no threat to the U.S., but what if? Because if you don't know, like Nigeria is ruled by African Muslims, not Arab Muslims, but African Muslims, and they're sort of from the northern part of Nigeria. There's major, they had a major civil war that I think millions died in. At least hundreds of thousands of people died in the Civil War. A lot of it from starvation and whatnot, not so much from bullets, but back in the 70s, they had a major civil war. So there's still major fractures in Nigerian society, and currently it's basically ruled from the Muslim north. But let's just say for some reason, and obviously they have their own problems with the real extremist Muslims, because the Muslim north aren't terribly moderate Muslims either, from what I understand. But Boko Haram that Most of you may have known that was in the news 10 years ago or something, and still periodically. But let's just say if that goes into some radical situation and they take lots of American hostages, because there's oil wells and other stuff in there, so I presume we have Americans working in that part of the world, and the U.S. needs to deal with Nigeria. It's not that Nigeria is going to send submarines to sink ships off of the U.S. coast, but what does the U.S. Navy need to do to neutralize the Navy of Nigeria, which is probably mostly just a Coast Guard type fleet at this point? But do that to then be able to go rescue hostages. So the U.S. Navy needs to do all of these kinds of things. But to get back to Japan, they don't. They're not a global fleet. They are a single ocean fleet. And so they look at, well, who can get us? Okay. Maybe number one is Britain, but Britain is very far away, and we've got lots of time before they concentrate and get here. Number two is the American fleet. They're here. They're mostly a Pacific-based fleet at this time, even more so once the war has broken out, because they know that the other European powers have left the Pacific, mostly. And so the main U.S. fleet, and also partially not to be provocative with the Germans, and there's no point. Carriers can be used to help launch ships to search for submarines to keep them off there, but that's not what the U.S. wanted to do, or Admiral King wanted to do. King, of course, wants to use destroyers and other light forces to patrol the western half of the Atlantic, keep shipping safe, basically, is just... there is a political alignment towards Britain, but the actions are really mostly just to keep ships safe. American ships at the highest priority, but just general ships safe. And so, there's a lot of naval activity, a lot of naval forces, but it's not the battleships, not the carriers. They are, and there's some minor carriers that are transferring around, but the big fleet's out in the Pacific. And it had been for some time. So the U.S. is not as big, doesn't have as big a navy as the British does. I think it's about as big as the French Navy, but I think the French Navy in some ways may be a bit more modern. I don't know all the details. But so the U.S. Navy is probably thought to be the second strongest Navy in the world by most people outside, well, I don't know how you count Japan, but of things. So at least of the non-Japanese fleets, it's probably the second strongest fleet in the world. The people view it as such because we can see that, like France had the strongest army in Europe, and it's defeated. Well, it appeared to have the strongest army in Europe. It had the most men, it had the most tanks, it had, even though they didn't think so at the time, France had as many modern not just fighters, but bombers and all that, modern combat aircraft as the Germans did. The French had as much as the Germans did. Germans gave the impression of having much more than they had, but France and Germany were about parity in Air Force capability of types of aircraft, of modern fighters to modern fighter, or roughly in modern bombers and whatnot. But the French were paranoid that the Germans had a lot more, the Luftwaffe had a lot more, and that's not even counting what the British had, who had been doing a major air buildup leading up to the war because they knew air would help protect the homeland. Britain's first obligation as a nation is to protect Britain, so that's the Navy and becoming of the Air Force. The Army is third on the list. It's important because it is on the ground out in the Empire and will be needed for any major wars in Europe, but you can wait 6 months, you can wait 2 years to build up your army so long as you're protecting Britain. Sort of British historical experience. So, the French and German air forces are about the same, but people don't realize that. So, like I was saying, France thought, and everybody thought France had the biggest army in Europe. They're sort of not counting Russia, and they knew Russia's probably was bigger, but so inferior, like they thought it was from the Russia of the pre-civil, I said civil, but pre-World War I army seemed to be so bad, and then the Russian Civil War and all that other stuff. They figured it was just big but not good, and it turns out to be better than everyone thought, and bigger than everyone thought. But still, the impression was that it was so powerful. So we can see how powerful was the U.S. Navy. Turned out very powerful, but just sinking the battleships shows that those battleships weren't that powerful. But since they sunk most of those battleships in harbor, most of the sailors, most of the officers, not on a couple of ships, the Arizona and I forget the other one that broke apart, its name, but most of them survived. So that's the talent survived, and U.S. industry was able to do it. So I know this is a long track to here, but you plan to fight possible threats. Yamamoto had gone along with that element of it full-heartedly for many years. Who could threaten Japan? Oh, and we get down, then France and maybe Italy or whatever. But so it's the U.S. is the big local threat, secondary sort of Britain. So wargaming all that stuff out, he's perfectly happy with. But, and he knows that, Britain could, or Britain or America or whatever could have a revolution. In 2 or 3 years' time, have a revolution, and then the revolutionaries in charge of the Navy, and then for whatever reason that revolution could hate all monarchies and want to invade Japan. So, what it is today, and so like Captain Hara, who as a cadet visits the U.S. on board one of the older Japanese battleships. I think it was a battleship or it was a heavy cruiser or whatever, doing sort of a world tour. He was one of, they bring a bunch of junior officers, out of their naval academy, but traveling around the U.S. and around the world, and stops at several U.S. ports, including New York City, in which he goes into one of the major department stores at the time. And he and like 3 other Japanese cadets are photographed like with the manager or whatever, the department store, and actually sort of makes the newspaper in America. And he buys a really nice pocket watch of high quality, hard to get at the time in Japan. Then he's not rich. He's very much not rich, but has enough money to afford that and is traveling around the world. So he has no ill feelings and has good feelings leading up to this war with America. Captain Hara as well, and is very much against the idea of going to war with America because he thinks that Japan's going to be defeated. So, but he's not an enemy of America. But even he realizes that if you look at you have the Russian Revolution, you have the Spanish Civil War. What could break out in the world, and fleet. And you for navies, and it's like I've been warned, and I have been. We are increasing our ship production here even more support vessels here, but navies are planned out years in advance. You don't get to just build them in 6 months because it takes years to build a carrier. So if you think there's no threats today, and there may not be any threats today, but if there's potential threats out there, meaning other big navies, political conditions can change. So you have to plan for that. Okay, so back to the meeting at Yokosuka, and I'll probably talk about this. Probably should have saved some of this for later. But so the Navy and the captains are all gathered here in Yokosuka Harbor on I think it is the Yamato, on one of the big battleships, because that's still the big thought to be the big battle winner deciders of naval battles, even though carriers would have been a better place to hold a meeting on the back of the carrier deck, or on the carrier deck. And so they're basically telling them that we're getting ready, and negotiations aren't going well with Hawaii or with Washington, and we're probably going to be attacking, Hawaii, and we're going to be attacking, other destinations. So they all get together, have this sort of secret in the sense of what's being said, and that they're all sort of doing this keeping away, like I say, the general sailors so they don't hear it, to try to keep secrecy. And then, and so they're all warned that if you get the message to turn around and come home, no matter what, you turn around and come home. You do not engage. And they're very sort of worried about, well, what if somebody spots us? What do we do? You know, do we shoot to sink them, you know, to keep them quiet? No, don't basically do that. There's a little bit of some of that stuff going on around the Philippines leading up to some of the submarines, that they deal with some submarine contacts, I think, if I remember correctly. But mostly it's, no, do not engage anybody until, you know, as this other channel likes to go, war were declared. And be ready to turn around. Don't let your enthusiasm, don't let whatever push you ahead to keep going with this, because, like I say, Yamamoto knows that this is going to destroy Japan, knows or believes that, generally speaking, Britain and America are good nations. I don't mean this in the sense of, oh, they're such good peoples and good, you know, do good for the world. No, they're not nations that are fundamentally an enemy of Japan. They're not like Britain, particularly under Churchill, would be an enemy of the Soviet Union, even if they're not fighting a war, because Churchill helps out the Soviet Union once he's in power, but as soon as the war's over, pretty quickly, and he's the one coins the term, the Iron Curtain, and you have the Cold War breaking out. So you may have, Britain and the Soviet Union are whether it's a Cold War or before the time period, they're not friendly nations to each other's existence. It doesn't mean that the Soviet peoples are bad peoples and the British peoples are good peoples. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the governments and whatever else. None of Britain or America were looking at invading Japan. Now, the conflict, of course, is over what's going on in China. And Yamamoto is also not a fan of what's going on in China. So there's those reasons. Plus the very real thing that if there was a settlement, we need to not fight this. So this is all set up to go. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to have all the fleet sitting here and then break it up and go into the other nations. So we've got here, these are going to be part of our, okay, 45 units. Let's see. I want to see about, 68. What is Kwajalein? Yeah, I think Kwajalein is a good option. Not so much that older one. Yeah. I don't know if we're going to have to strip off some destroyers or something to be able to get the range set up for that. Okay, so no real point in keeping these guys at home. What is it? Truck. And let's send these guys out to truck to be ready to operate there. Yeah, I think the truck command. May be good for that. Okay, that's all those major fleets. Okay, those are going off to deal with that. They're heading out to getting ready for the Philippines expedition. Shokaku. I think I'm going to keep these guys at home because we got some more carriers coming very soon. I'm planning on attaching them to the Zuikaku group. I think that's, not that I can't send out some more. I think that'll also, we'll send them out to here. I think that's looking for the Hawaiian campaign first. Make sure we When that to Taiho, that's a... The real Taiho was a sort of a very, very modern, upgraded carrier from all the rest of Japan's. But that was a late war improvement. This is just obviously the name. I'm thinking that I've got enough with those 3 big groups, if they can get to here. Enough to deal with whatever the immediacy will be there. I may not. We're going to send these... How much can we... oh yeah, 180. Okay. They'll be able to support that. Be ready to deal with what's going on down the British. Okay. So... I am thinking of adding a few more. Yeah, we should send these guys out to these, some of just the LCs, but landing craft. I am worried a bit about what do we have for range here. Yes, these just aren't like long enough range. Well, what's the range on this? Okay, that would be long enough. Well, maybe we'll put these out as sort of close escorts for some of the landing craft. Columbia is offering money for metal. We would give them... no, we got plenty of metal. Okay, medium bomber prototypes. Very good. Okay, yeah, we might as well... Oh, no, we want to start doing these things. Gotta remember to... don't think we're building too many subs now, but that would be a short-range aircraft production. Subs. We need to just keep moving stuff over to that. See, I find it very sort of fascinating because it's there, and I'm exposed at different times to it. When I've read about different militaries, you know, you can pick, say, like modern day Thailand or something. Their army is configured, or is, you know, war games and strategy, how to defend and fight in and around Thailand. Where, being that 2 things: one, a war gamer who war games throughout history, so we are looking at all kinds of hypothetical things as opposed to, you know, as well as real things. But so I'm worried about how, you know, armies will fight wherever. Plus, being an American, I'm expecting the American army to be able to fight anywhere. But most armies, sure, they may have, oh yeah, we'll send you, you know, 2 battalions to help out and, you know, maintaining order in Afghanistan or something like that. Great. But they're really worried about defending Estonia or whatever else out. And that's what they, you know, not just, well, how many tanks should we buy? It's more like, should we spend any money on tanks? Because would tanks help us defend Estonia, you know, against the likely threats? Because maybe you want to go guerrilla warfare strategy and have lots of tow missiles and RPG-7s and whatnot to, you know, to deal with any big tank invasions, you know. Just you've got to work out for a specific, very specific set of conditions. Cruiser warfare. Okay, oh no, that's the naval, oh here. Yes, this one we are going to move over to here, and yeah, we will put it short-range aircraft. Get that going, and destroyer escort role as well. So that would be, oh, up here, right? Okay. And here, let's do, artillery production. We'll do that. Reduce the ICs needed for that. I'm thinking about putting these in with what is it, the Shokaku group, the one that just had the one good carrier in it. Still here, yeah. Not that that isn't a useful group, but adding 2 more carriers to it would make it that much more useful. Okay, what tech was that? Okay, airplane radio communications. That's under electronic, and yeah, we'll stop that. And again, to move it over to small arms, then we'll do automotive. We have some, I don't know if we have any automotive in production now, but we will very likely, I got a few of these things, but and we'll be producing more infantry type divisions, I'm sure. But we're already into producing some of our newer batch of escort vessels, including anti-aircraft carriers, or not carrier, anti-aircraft cruisers, as well as light cruisers, a few torpedo boats. Yes, they're somewhat useful, and they're cheap, and once they get into production, they'll be fast to produce, so they'll keep the practicals down. Okay, Soviet Union is declared for the motherland. Does that mean we are at war with, or they're at war with somebody? I mean, it won't be at war with us, but yep. The war with Germany starts. Okay, so Germany has invaded or declared a war. I don't know if they've actually invaded yet. I'm looking to see where the damn German army is, because it certainly the hell ain't here. Where the hell is the German army? Oh, okay, here it is. The German army, before declaring war on the Soviet Union, got sent down to oh god, sent down to deal with partisans, it looks like, in Serbia. Is that what it's doing? Because it seems to be sort of kind of coming down this way and not going to Turkey. So we have all of these units here. Man, this is going to be, you know, unguarded Soviet border, and I don't know who declared war on who. Okay. Okay, Germany declared war on the Soviet Union. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god. And expand the undeclared war, expand the Pan-American Security Zone to Central Atlantic. Okay. So the U.S. is sort of expanding out there. Submarine crew training has advanced. Very good. Oh no, come down here. Yeah, even though that isn't super far in advance, we are going to... Well, no, let's see about moving these guys to damage control here. Well, that's 43, yeah, so we'll do the industry. Get the last one of those. And light cruiser escort roll, very good. Ooh, carrier task force, that's what we want to move that into. That will help us with many things. Okay, I know I talked a lot, so we didn't get much going on the clock, but I think a combination of this clusterfuck, we'll use the actual word because it's warranted at this moment, of what's going on here will be a good place to start the next episode. I want to thank you all for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And of course, I really love hearing from you. So please post a question, comment, just say hi. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.